obsessed Bitcoin guy. And the thing about being the obsessed Bitcoin guy at a big corporation is you start telling people, you gotta buy, you gotta buy, you gotta buy. The price of Bitcoin, now it's late 2013, is spiking from $200 to $1,000. So I felt like I was in the right. You know, obviously Bitcoin is gonna be the future, so you guys should all buy. And a lot of people bought at $1,000, which for people today, this sounds like a great buy. The price is $4,700 right now. What? 750. Yes, of course, with Bitcoin Cash. Right. Well, it's 750 plus 4,700, really, right? What? Oh, okay. Got it. Nice. So it sounds like a great idea, but actually at the time, the price of Bitcoin was about to crash, and it was going to crash for 2 years down to a low of about $250 and stay there. So actually, these were no longer my best friends, but my worst enemies at this point. And of course, they all sold, and now the price is back up, and I always tell them, you should have held, right? But why did this happen, right? Why did the price spike up to $1,000 and then drop down? And it's a very important concept to know about and remember, because this is, I think that this exact same thing is going to happen in the ICO industry, and it's going to cause a slowdown. It's not going to kill it, but it's going to cause a slowdown for a period of time. And so what happened? The first thing that happened during this time was China. China came out, and they were worried. Look at this new anonymous technology. People are going to use it to send money out of our country. And for those of you who don't know, you can only send $50,000 a year as an individual out of China. They were really afraid of this. And they thought, okay, Bitcoin is going to be used for this. We need to stop it. So they sent out this notice that said, Bitcoin is maybe illegal, maybe not legal. We're not going to regulate it. You shouldn't use it. Beware. And as soon as this went out, the price dipped from $1,000 to $700, $650, and it was sort of oscillating between this $650 and $750 for a month, maybe 2 months. And at this time, you still have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interest, and this was still around the time that companies were raising lots of money. Coinbase raised, I believe, like $30 million, and BitPay raised around $30 million. This is the top of the Bitcoin hype cycle. Companies are raising money left and right, and these lots of ideas like tipping in Bitcoin, which can never really have that big of a market cap, or raising tons of money. And so what happened after this? What happened after China said no? This exchange called Mt. Gox got hacked. I mean, no one really knows exactly what happened with Mt. Gox, but they ended up losing around 650,000 Bitcoin, which was around $650 million at the time. And the price just plummeted, because this was the #1 Bitcoin exchange. Everyone held their money on it. A lot of early Bitcoiners lost most of their money, and the ecosystem, I guess, was sort of tossed into disarray. The price goes down to 200, and this one really cool, awesome word, Bitcoin, which could get you into doors of investor meetings and accelerators and potential partners, all of a sudden became taboo, right? Everyone wants to join when everything's hot, but when it's kind of in the, going down, people are kicking it around saying it's not worthwhile anymore. And so this happened from, it stayed low between 2014, early 2014, until mid to late 2016. And it was interesting because the narrative started to change. You couldn't ever go into any meeting with anyone basically coming out saying, we're Bitcoin, we do Bitcoin. They basically would laugh at you, unless you're in the Bitcoin ecosystem, you're talking to people in the street. People would laugh at you and say, go look the other way. And just to show a little bit of contrast, when the price was high, I went to a conference. It was Inside Bitcoins and Coin Agenda. And when the price was high, people had lots of money. They were throwing it around. I very much remember a couple after parties where they would rent tables at clubs and have unlimited bottles of vodka being swashed around, people dancing on tables with hot women around their arms. And then, you know, the next day they rent out this $40,000 suite at the Palms Hotel with a jacuzzi and an infinity pool and all this crazy stuff. And then to top it all off, you have like an evening dinner at like Mike Tyson's mansion, which has an indoor fountain and a lake and 2 pools. It was crazy. So money was being flaunted around. Now Bitcoin is $200. Everyone's money that they're throwing around is just not there anymore. The conferences get scaled back. The investors don't care about the word. The partners won't touch you. The banks always don't like it, and they still don't like it. They'll never like it because it basically represents, you know, a huge challenge to these guys. And I can talk about that later, I guess. But essentially, the new thing to say was we are a blockchain company, right? And this is before the concept of this permissioned private blockchain system existed. For those that don't know what a permission or a private blockchain means, it means that instead of having proof of work or instead of having proof of stake, you have proof of trust, right? And there's some element to the system where you actually have to ask permission to participate. To run a node, to do a transaction, what have you. But that didn't exist. People were just calling themselves blockchain companies, and this is because Jamie Dimon would say, I don't know about this Bitcoin thing, but this blockchain thing has something to it. So no one would ever take a meeting when you said Bitcoin, but when you said blockchain, wow, this is like the coolest technology in the world. Please come in and have a conversation with us. And so you're talking with these big enterprises and the VCs, and everyone's really excited about this technology. And of course, when you start seeing a hype like this, people catch on. People start saying, oh, okay, well, we have a blockchain too. We have marketing software, and it's blockchain compatible. We have legal contracts that you can sign on the internet. And by the way, you can put it on a blockchain, right? And over the course of 2 years, this term got totally bastardized. It got turned into something that basically had virtually no meaning other than a database where more than one person looks at it. Before we ended up getting out of this phase, though, people were trying to figure out what is the actual application for a blockchain. How could we, as a Bitcoin company, say that we do something with the blockchain? Well, the idea is you have some sort of fancy slide like this, and instead of having a Bitcoin right there, you have some fancy chains and blocks. And voila, you're actually using the blockchain to move the money. Who cares about this little Bitcoin thing? At least this is what, these are the conversations that you ended up having to have with people. And so you would never really see this line in any pitch deck, but you'd see blocks and chains all around here. And so people were really excited and really energized. Banks were especially interested. I joined an accelerator, and they introduced us to tons and tons and tons of banks. And they're trying to figure out, what is this thing? How does it work? Is it going to disrupt us? How do we do it for ourselves? And we were a naive little Bitcoin company that thought, oh, yeah, banks, we want to partner with banks. They're going to give us lots of customers, because why wouldn't they do that if they want to talk to us? And so we'd go in, and we'd sit there and we tell them like exactly how everything worked, how you buy the Bitcoin, sell it on different exchanges, what are the different stakeholders. This is when I started learning the term brain drain. I don't know if you guys know this term very well, but it's when you talk with someone telling them the intention of working with them, and then they just get all your information and say, thank you, bye. I don't really want to point fingers or name names when it comes to banks, but there were a fairly good number of banks that would do this kind of thing. And for them, they were thinking, how do we replicate this on our own? They can basically never really, at least for quite a long time period, they're not going to be able to use cryptocurrency internally. And the main reason why is, you think about who is being taken out of the process when you're using cryptocurrency. And yes, you can use a blockchain and create more transparency, which means that it's much easier to audit the technology, much easier to see what's being done, and this is a great thing, but you're also taking away control from a centralized party. And so you might think, who's the centralized party if it's between the banks, and it turns out it's like the Federal Reserves. And you go to a regulator and you say, hey, I'd like to take power away from you. I don't really know if they want to say yes to that. And so they were trying to figure out, how can we do this? How can we use a cryptocurrency and replicate what these guys are doing and not go out of business? And this is when private and permission blockchains came, because we are able to use this blockchain technology and say we're doing blockchain and tell our shareholders we're doing blockchain, so don't worry about it. But in reality, they're not actually creating a new settlement mechanism. They're creating a transparency platform. And why is it just a transparency platform? Why? And here's the reason. When you think about the values of a blockchain, you can really think of it as being able to provide proof of authenticity services, notarization services, data aggregation and transparency services, and then finally asset settlement. And these first three things are achievable on any type of blockchain, permission or permissionless. But this last one, asset settlement, maybe not so much. Why is this? Well, let's think of an example of what we call pink slip in the United States. A pink slip is it's a representation of your car. So if you own this pink piece of paper in the United States, it proves that you own the car. You can obviously tokenize this piece of paper, right? And if I do a transaction with you, I send you the piece of paper, and I send you the token. You now can prove that that token was originally created by the manufacturer of the car, because you could follow the token along the chain. You can prove when that transaction occurred, because you have that record on the blockchain. If you put the information on the pink slip on the blockchain, everyone can see not just that you have the token, but they can see the information on it as well. But asset settlement, if you go to a judge, let's say, and you have the token, but actually I have the pink slip, and I say, hey, I own the car. And the guy with the token says, no, I own the car. It turns out that this is not a technical issue to determine who owns the car. It's a legal issue and a political issue, right? The judge has to basically decide, that this is the case, or there has to be regulation in place that says that this token actually represents this car, this asset. And so as a result, if we move this to money, and we think about it with money, right? What you're saying is you're trying to get various governments to decide that this is exactly the case. Maybe you get it locally in a city, maybe you get it in a county, maybe you get it in a country, but what about like cross-country legal and regulatory elements, right? To get multiple countries around the world to agree on monetary policy is very hard. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very likely a very long time for you to actually have this happen. So the idea of being able to tokenize an asset and move it in a way where that asset actually represents the value requires international cooperation from governments. And so why doesn't this happen with Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency? The reason why this doesn't happen with that is because unlike the example of the pink slip, where the token represents something that's valuable, with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the token actually is the value. It's no longer a representation of value. So when I send you that token, you actually have the value. There's no regulation over that because people value it. If I send you a representation of value, there's a legal framework around whether or not that actually represents the value or not, because you can debate that. You can't debate that the Bitcoin you have has one value or another. The market itself determines that. And so the banks have been trying to figure out this problem for quite a long time, trying to see if they can do it, and they haven't since 2015, and maybe even as early as 2014, when they've been brain draining companies like us. They haven't been able to come up with a solution. And it is directly because of this issue. So then, here we are. We are this blockchain company. And, I guess what could be, do you guys know a lot about how the payment system works and why it is that Bitcoin actually provides value in the payment world? I guess maybe I'll go into it, since you guys seem like either you don't know or you're lost, one of the two. And so it turns out that people often think that payments should be as easy as sending an email, right? I send you a secure version of an email. Hey, I just sent you $10,000, la-di-da. But if you take an extreme example, you think about a bank in South Africa and a bank in Argentina. Bank in Argentina tries to send you an email saying, I just sent you $10,000. The bank in Argentina is going to say, wait a second. Like, I don't know anything about this bank, right? I don't know if it sent me money. This is just an email. I don't even know if they had the money to begin with. How can I possibly know that they had the money to begin with? There's a lack of trust. Where does this lack of trust come from? It comes from private blockchains. Private ledgers, not private blockchains. Private ledgers. And the idea here is that because I can't see any of this, the finances in this bank, I cannot trust that it has those finances in the bank because it's private. And it's a good thing that it's private because you want to keep your customers and your own funds private. But it makes it very hard for cross-border payments. So what happens is you have a correspondent banking system. Banks have bank accounts with other banks. So in an ideal world, bank in South Africa has a bank account with bank account in the bank in Argentina. I send money from me to Bob. Bob's in Argentina. Money goes from my account in the South African bank to the Argentinian account in the South African bank. And then this is picked up in the bank in Argentina, moves money out of the bank account in South Africa into the Argentinian bank. And this would be great if every single bank had bank accounts with every other bank in the world. But it doesn't happen like this. And this is because of regulation, knowledge of the regulation locally, and ability to monitor that bank account, that bank, to actually know that it has that money. And so as a result, you see intermediaries. You get a small bank in South Africa to a big bank in South Africa to a bank in Europe, probably like Deutsche Bank or Barclays or UBS, to a big bank in Argentina, and finally a small bank in Argentina. So you get all of these intermediaries touching the transaction and delaying it. And so as a result, it's slow, 3 to 5 days. It costs 8% on average. But remember, the main issue here is that these all have private ledgers. You can't trust any of the banks because they don't tell you, they're not transparently showing everyone how much money they have on their accounts. But with Bitcoin, you have a public ledger. And as a result, when I send you an email, in that public ledger, in that email, I have a link to a public ledger that verifiably proves in an immutable way that I actually sent you the money. And as a result, you do not need all the intermediaries delaying the transaction and taking a fee. And a big difference here between permissioned and public blockchains is that, sure, you end up creating some sort of transparency mechanism where all the banks now know where the money is, but they actually can't figure out how to move the money from here to here. So you still have this entire process in a permission blockchain environment. You just happen to know that the money is here, here, or here, and all parties know it. So it was around. So this is what we were going around telling people, right? We weren't talking about that Bitcoin is for the unbanked, that this new cryptocurrency will now become digital gold, for which people will use as an alternative to fiat currency, which it is, and we see it happening all around the world. But we're using this fancy blockchain thing. And it was in 2013, maybe mid 2014, when we were, pivoting to this, even though it's not really a pivot, that this really cool, interesting concept called Aetherium shows its face. And this gets a lot of buzz in the Bitcoin community. People are starting to talk, smart contracts. These are really cool, interesting things. Who's this wonder boy Vitalik? And I'm pretty new in the industry. In 2014, I go to a meetup, and someone says, "Hey, there's some people from Aetherium at this hacker house in San Francisco. Let's go check it out." So we go over, and it's not the kind of place that you think Aetherium people would be talking about. You go to the middle of this place called the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which has a bunch of homeless people around and people doing shots of heroin on the side of the street, and you think you're gonna get mugged, and then you go inside this big hacker house, and it's maybe 30 developers, and you have Vitalik Buterin and Gavin Wood sitting right there, and at this time, Vitalik was not the really strong talker that he is now. He was very brilliant, but he was not as maybe extroverted, you might say. And so he was sitting there in his computer, typing away, coding away, trying to figure out, what's the next element of Ethereum to build. And so instead you have Gavin Wood sitting there, and I remember him explaining the smart contract use case to me. So I was like, why exactly are these things valuable? And this, now people talk about decentralized autonomous organizations for Uber and things like that, but it was a lot more simple back then. The use case that he said was, you're gonna do a drug deal, and you've got your I'm paraphrasing here, But you got your kilos of cocaine ready for shipment, and the thing is, you're not entirely convinced that the guy on the other side is going to pay you, and so you hire a hitman. And there's a smart contract that says, unless you see coins enter this account by a certain time, don't call off the hit on the other side. So the idea being that you use the smart contract and with an assassin or a hitman to cancel the bad effects of a deal gone wrong. And so you think about, this is clearly for the CryptoPunk community, right? These guys also came from the CryptoPunk. Of course, they would never do this anymore, right? They would never talk about these sort of things, but this is like the early stages of the CryptoPunk that you hear about in Bitcoin, and actually it was there in Ethereum as well. So we see these little things like this happening, and now we are in a later stage. I'd say 2016, and the ecosystems are more evolved. DAO has come out as a concept, and I'm working in a building with a large enterprise. I'm not going to name it, but it's a large enterprise, very large. You've heard of it before, and at the time, they're experimenting. They sort of get that permission blockchains aren't the way, and they're trying to decide whether to do Ethereum or not. Bitcoin was still like totally taboo. No one touched that thing. Price of Bitcoin maybe was recovering to like $400, $500 at this time in 2016, but no one would ever talk about it still. Still, we're blockchain and maybe Ethereum, but mostly blockchain. And then the DAO started happening, and people were really excited about smart contracts and decentralized autonomous organizations, there was all this hype, $150 million raised in their ICO, which still wasn't called an ICO. And then there was the hack, and sort of this realization that smart contracts aren't a perfect solution. Giacomo sort of explained a little bit earlier of all the issues that could come up with smart contracts that are basically not built well. And the idea, so now people are a little bit worried about the smart contracts. You have the hard fork that occurs, so you sort of lose the precedence of immutability per se. And now I'm talking to like the innovation people at this large enterprise, and they're starting to say, permission blockchain things aren't really working. I'm not really sure if Ethereum is the right way to go or not. Why don't we start looking at this Bitcoin thing again? And this was very interesting. It was the first time that I ever heard someone at like an enterprise being like, yeah, let's look at Bitcoin again. At this point, blockchain as a concept had been legitimized. Smart contracts were starting to be worked on. Why don't we try this thing that's been around for basically the longest amount of time? And all of a sudden, little by little, the price starts going up, and VCs are starting to be more interested in Bitcoin, and potential partners are more interested. Then the end of 2016 happens, right? The price just goes wild, goes crazy, and the ecosystem doubles, triples, quadruples. It goes insane. And all of a sudden, Bitcoin is like the coolest thing ever. I went to a pitch meeting, and they would say, don't say the word blockchain. I've heard that word like 1,000 times. I want to hear the word Bitcoin. It's like, whoa, I've been trained for the past 2 years that this is like the worst thing on earth. And now it's cool again. Pretty cool. And so now you see this world where investors and partners are really interested by this Bitcoin thing. How do we play around with it? How do we test it? How do we work with it? And of course, now you have dApps and ICO, which is the new player on the block. And it's pretty funny because you're starting to see investors a little bit afraid of this thing. I talked to an investor, and they're like a Series B investor. If you work in the Bitcoin, and if you work in startups in general, you'll find that for some reason, none of the investors that can invest in your price range ever reach out to you, but only the ones that like want to like write like $20 million checks will reach out to you. And so they reach out, and we start talking about the product, and then mention the word ICO, and all of a sudden, you know, because we realize that there's not a good compatibility because they want to invest in something with $20 million, and you know we don't want VC money for $20 million at this point. So all of a sudden, the conversation talks about ICOs, and you could tell that this guy is like very afraid of this concept. Like, do you think that people are just going to do ICOs in the future? Like, what's the future of this? Will people IPO? It's very interesting, and how this tide has changed, where now there's a new person on the block that potentially is going to be disrupted, and you're talking with them, and they're afraid. They're not. They're nicer about it and more transparent than the banks are, but it's an interesting thing to see. And you see this dichotomy between the Bitcoin world and the ICO world, where most Bitcoin people, hardcore Bitcoin people, think ICOs are just totally scams, and you know, most of them are totally scams. You know, mainly because you don't have an actual reason to create the token, when you can just do the product with like Bitcoin or with like fiat money. But you know, it turns out that why this is happening, why there's so much hype in the ecosystem, is because this new token has a really interesting use case. There's the core fundamentals of it, which are valuable. I think that when the bubble bursts, so to speak, and only a mini bubble that's going to burst, it'll still have the core fundamentals to rely on. Core fundamentals being, think about Kickstarter, for instance. If you buy something on Kickstarter, and you're basically locked in until the product is delivered. And as a result, you take on risk. What if the person doesn't deliver? What if the person never pays you back after not delivering? You kind of get worried. But with a token, you have less risk, right? You buy the good in advance, and as a result, if you at some point are afraid that the good is not going to be made, you can sell off that risk to someone else. Now, right now, people are using tokens not as pre-orders, but as actual, you know, like investment, betting, trading tools, which maybe it always will be. But because of this core fundamental, it's basically a better version of Kickstarter, if you want. It's going to have other fundamental elements that will keep it alive. But why is there so much hype? There are two different reasons, I think the most interesting one is capital flight. It's a great mechanism for people to move their money out of a country that they don't have a lot of, that they're not able to move money out of for. Right? I think I was talking about this earlier. People in China can only move $50,000 a year out of the country. Kind of sounds familiar, right? Now what people can do is they can buy Bitcoins, which are very transparent and not very private, and more and more becoming like this, and then they'll buy tokens, and they'll have these tokens which can get them access to like European and U.S. startups, or maybe they get access to non-European U.S. startups. They wait until the ICO is over because everyone's afraid to sell the ICO in the U.S. Let the money go on the exchanges so that the U.S. people can now buy. The price goes up because now the U.S. people are able to buy the token, and then they offload and they get their money out higher and in some other country. So this similar mechanism for moving money around in a way that essentially makes it so that you can't follow it. It's driving a lot of the price, and when the countries that this is happening in realize this, they're going to come out with warnings, saying, "Hey, we don't know about ICOs. They might be illegal." And this sort of work, you actually kind of see a little bit of this happening in China and Russia, which I would propose are likely the two biggest countries for this kind of stuff. And when that becomes widespread and enough people hear about it and know about it, the interest level is going to go down a lot because the everyday investor is going to get scared, is going to get spooked, the price will go down. The amount being invested will go down, at least for a period of time, right? And it'll sort of be based off of the fundamentals that'll bring it back up. But in terms of interesting evolutions that are happening for the fundamentals of Bitcoin, I think today we see Bitcoin finally showing itself as a store of value, a global store of value. And the most evident experience of this is where you can see price arbitrage happening on exchanges around the world. So everyone seems to think that there's a single global price for Bitcoin all around the world, but in reality, if you just check Bitstamp and Kraken, these two large exchanges in Europe, you'll find that they themselves have different rates. And if you look at what's happening in different countries and compare what's happening in different countries, these countries will have different rates as well. And the reason for this is that people are looking at Bitcoin as a store of value like gold, like silver. When political and economic situations in countries get worse, people run to Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin increases in that country at a higher rate than it does in other countries. And a great example that I've been talking about for quite a while is what's happened in India this past November. So in India, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the demonetization of the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, which were worth about 14 and 7 USD respectively at the time. And as mostly a cash-based society, it ended up taking a big hit because 86% of the cash in circulation disappeared. This represented 86% of the cash in circulation. And so there was lots of chaos that was happening. People would have to wait in line for hours. You can watch videos of these huge lines where when people are trying to cut, you have police officers with bamboo sticks beating people, making sure that they don't do it. The stores are still trying to conduct commerce, so they go on a total trust system. You go in, you want to buy something, you write your name down on a piece of paper to basically have the IOU that you're going to bring back money at some point in the future. And so, it's reasonable to assume that your country's economy is going to take a hit when you see things like this happening. And so you saw that the price of Bitcoin increased between 20 and 40% on these exchanges in India compared to other places in the world. And we're seeing this. We're personally, as a company, seeing this happen around the world in India and in other places. Why? Because if you're a worker in India and you're receiving your wages through our system, what's happening is we're buying Bitcoin in the US, let's just say for $1,000 to make it easy, and then we're selling Bitcoin in India for $1,200 worth of Indian rupee. And so you're making money. You're actually making money that didn't exist. And so what's this? So how does this compare? You end up looking at like the Google exchange rates, and you say, okay, usually this is the baseline, and someone's charging me a fee above this, right? You might look at like a PayPal or TransferWise and compare, and you'll see, oh, they do 1% or 4% or 5% or whatever. But in this, it almost looks like a scam, because you look and it's 20% better than the rate, and you're like, how the hell is this possible? And it's because people are moving to the currency to hedge the risk of economic slowdowns. And it happens around the world. And in many places, it's actually a constant. Sure, if you want to see 20 to 40% differences, this is only when there's an economic shock to the system. Like when the president of Brazil was found to be corrupt, running corrupt deals, the price of Bitcoin skyrocketed 50%, right? People were making 50% more money through our platform. But in other places, and this typically tends to happen when you're talking about like moving from Europe, US, UK to some developing country, you'll see maybe between 1% and 5% gains actually, almost at all times. And this is a very interesting phenomenon, which leads me to believe that one day Bitcoin itself is going to be considered digital gold, because it already has this use case, and it's already better than gold in basically every single way that you can possibly think. It's better scarce-wise. It's better for a medium of exchange. It's better for holding it and securing it. But the only thing that it has over Bitcoin is that it's physical. Why is it better if it's physical? Well, in the random doomsday scenario that quantum computing exists and gets in the hands of criminals before we could defend against it, gold will actually probably be the best form of money. But until that happens, you have Bitcoin as sort of the strong store value. So I guess how much more time do I have in terms of no one's what? Yeah, okay. Well, that's basically my story. In terms of what we've been seeing, what we've been doing, how the ecosystem has evolved over the past 2 or 3 years. It's gone light years, right? You started in a world where people were cypherpunks, and Bitcoin was exciting, but people didn't really know what it was going to be used for. People thought it would be, the system for unbanked users around the world. Turns out that all the companies that tried to go after the unbanked users went out of business a long time ago, and rarely unbanked users are actually using cryptocurrencies. And instead, you're seeing these new use cases. You're seeing Bitcoin for digital gold. You're seeing tokens for increasing the tradability of essentially future goods and services. And I guess it'll be interesting to see what are the new developments that come up. And yeah, that's my presentation. Any questions about this?
Any questions?
About,
No one?
about maybe, you know, what's happened in the Bitcoin ecosystem, how, you know, wondering how could we have gotten to this point?
Have you come across with RSK?
With what?
RSK, rootstock.
Rootstock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have I come across rootstock? So, I mean, one of the things that I've come to realize in the Bitcoin ecosystem is, and the cryptocurrency ecosystem, is to not get too excited about things that don't exist, because sometimes those things like never end up existing. Now, rootstock is on its way to existing, and I believe that it actually will exist and bring smart contracts to Bitcoin, and that this is this could potentially be a very interesting application to have the security of Bitcoin and the network effect of Bitcoin combined with smart contracts. But
Somehow, have you happened to meet them? Like, did you meet the
meet
team?
people. Oh, okay. So let's see. I haven't met them, but I have met the Lightning people, right? Which is another interesting development that happens in the Bitcoin space. So interestingly,
Smart contracts?
what?
That is also with a smart contract, or what?
So in terms of the smart contract, let's see. The most interesting person that I've met and I've talked with is Stephen Toole, who you may or may not have heard of, but he runs a company called Slockit. He was involved with the DAO actually, which, you know, wasn't the nicest thing in the world, but he's working on a lot of new smart contract projects. In terms of people who are building smart contracts on a daily basis on one of these big projects, it's a good question. So you know, I think an interesting point though to talk about less on smart contracts but future developments is with the Lightning people, right? These people have. I ended up meeting this woman named Elizabeth Stark when we were invited by the EFF, and I can't remember what the actual words in that acronym were, but we ended up lobbying the Californian government on this bill that would have regulated Bitcoin and blockchain, which would have been actually a really big deal because over 50% of the money invested in companies were based in California. And it would have been before the concept of smart contracts had really been thought through, and the concept of color coins had really been thought through, and really limiting a lot of the processes that different companies would build. And she was the one that led this effort. It turns out that this woman, Elizabeth Stark, is this woman behind the scenes that knows everyone, is in lots of different elements of Bitcoin and perhaps the greater blockchain ecosystems, and essentially making sure that a lot of this that this ecosystem continues to evolve. But it was interesting because you go around when you're like lobbying, and this is just a general startup thing that's interesting. You're actually going to the lobbies of different different politicians, right? They'll have like their building where all the politicians are in, and you walk in the lobby, finding people in the lobby, and talking to them and like convincing them of what it is that you're doing to make sure that that they understand your point of view, and make sure that they build good, sensible regulation for everyone. But yeah, in terms of people that I know in the direct smart contract space, it's not really so hard.
Anyone else? Question to Jonathan? Because it looks like you've got the last chance to ask him questions. No? Okay. Thanks, Jonathan, for your awesome presentation. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming over and spending this time with us. Thanks to all our amazing sponsors. Thank you again, guys, because without you, it wouldn't happen. And I guess we're gonna just chill here for a bit, have some more beers, because there are plenty of them left over, chat a bit, and we're gonna go to the bar, which is, I'm gonna put the address up there in a second, because, yeah, I'm just gonna do it. Thank you again.